everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and I have a project to share with you today. We are in the middle of our Middle Ages unit and we are going to make this princess hat. We are using the book called Days of Knights and Damsels, an activity guide by Lori Carlson. Now, I really like the activity books by Lori Carlson. I find that the activities are really easy to do, usually with supplies that you probably already have around your house. Now, I'm going to take this project up a notch. I'm going to start out by using some construction paper and do the project as intended in the book, but I'm actually going to use that original hat as a template so that I can actually cut it out of felt. And since my felt is 100% wool felt and kind of pricey, I want to make sure that the hat fit so that I didn't waste any felt. So I am taping 2 large pieces of construction paper together, and then I need to do 2 lines that are 12 inches long with an angle of about 90 degrees in the middle. I just eyeballed this. I didn't actually measure the angle, and it turns out pretty good in the end. Then you want about 23 inches for the arc that connects the 2 lines. So I'm going to cut this out now and assemble it and just make sure that it actually fits my daughter before I cut into the actual felt. So I'm adding a little bit more tape here, kind of rounded the paper on the edge of my table so that I could get a nice cone. And I'm going to tape up the rest of it. So it's a little bit kind of big on one side, so I'm eyeballing this and just trimming it off with my scissors so that I can get a proper template. And then I'm going to take it over to my daughter and see if it fits her, and it does. It fits her just right. I'm really pleased with the way that the paper template turned out. At this point, I want to fix my template and make sure that all around the hat, it's all even, because I'm going to be cutting this out of felt and I want to make sure that it's even all the way around. And so I added this little piece of scrap paper in order to fix that, and then I can have a proper template. And of course, I have to cut it up in order to be able to use it as a pattern. I'm using this gorgeous teal blue wool felt by A Child's Dream. This is the merino wool felt, 100% wool. It's gorgeous and it holds up really well. Now, I recommend using a good quality wool felt for this project because we're going to be doing some stitching, and if you're using an acrylic felt, you may find that it doesn't hold up very well to the stitching on the edge. So now I just want to check to make sure that it is even all the way around. I noticed a little part that's not quite even, so I'm going to just trim that off, and I am using a pencil to mark on my felt, but because that's going to be on the inside, it's not going to show, but you could also use chalk pencil if you wanted to erase it. So now it's time to do the decorative parts, and I've got my felting needle here in order to do some felting, and I'm going to choose some wool top. I'm not quite sure which colors I want, and I'm going to do more of like a tone on tone. It's going to look a little bit like mermaid colors, but I'm really pleased with the way it turns out in the end, and so is my daughter, who I'm making this for, so it's important that she likes it too. So I'm going to separate this wool and try to blend 2 colors together. I have a jade and an aqua color. They're just beautiful and breathtaking. But I keep tearing them and putting them together and tearing them and putting them together so I can get kind of they look like they're really blended. But in the end, it doesn't look like they're super blended. You can kind of see where the 2 colors are, but it's still a really beautiful kind of whimsical look. So I'm needle felting this into the wool, and it's super easy. It's probably like the easiest felting I've ever done. And I am just going to go along the whole perimeter of the hat, and you can see the backside how the felt kind of goes in, or rather the wool goes in through the felt. You do need a felting needle to do this and a little foam pad. You can see how quickly and easily this came together. It's super beautiful. All right, so at this point, I'm going to gently tear the excess off on the end. I didn't want to cut this part because I want to felt it over onto the other side of the hat so that it looks like it's just one long piece that's gone all the way around. But I did trim off that initial part, which I suppose I could have trimmed off the other side. But anyway, it's going to look good in the end. But let's move on to adding the tassels at the very top of the hat. This product is absolutely gorgeous. It's called Silken Ribbons. It is a pricey edition at $5.98 for several yards, but it is so gorgeous. And we got these mermaid colors, so it's kind of variegated green and blue. It's just beautiful. So I'm going to sew that at the top, and I'm just going into my little binder here that has my sewing supplies. And I've got two different color teal threads to use, and I'm going to go with the one that's not metallic. And I also wanted to adjust the length of the tassel so that it was just a bit longer than the hat, but not too long. Since I don't have a lot of this particular product, I want it to be fuller rather than longer. But if you had a more affordable alternative to your ribbons, you could certainly get creative and get it really nice and full. So all I did was fold it in half a couple of times, and then I'm running my needle through the center binding rather than sewing through each of those ribbons. And I did this for two reasons. One, I thought it would hold better, but also if I made a mistake and I decided to take it apart, I think that it would preserve the integrity of the ribbon just a little bit better. All right, so once that's in place, I can start on the more difficult task of sewing our hat together. Now I'm going to hand stitch this, and I'm going to use some embroidery floss. So I'm going to get a different needle that has a slightly larger eye so that I can fit my embroidery floss through this. You could do this with just some thread and a regular needle as well. So I decided to go with a color that was pretty close to the felt rather than doing something that stood out and have a contrasting color. I'm also going to separate my embroidery floss. The one that we're using comes with 6 strands, so I just wanted 3 strands. Now I'm showing you what I'm originally doing, but I'm actually going to take this apart. But this was probably a better way to do it, but just the wrong stitch. I wanted one of the flaps over onto the other side. I thought that would give a nicer look, but I was trying to do a decorative stitch that just did not come out at all. I was trying to do a blanket stitch, but it didn't look so good. So I took it out and I decided to do something a little bit more simple. Want to make sure that the tassels were coming out right from the top so that I had as pointy as a top as I could. And then I'm just going to do, I think it's just a loop stitch all the way down the back. Now this is pretty easy, but it does alter the shape of the cone just slightly when you look at the finished product, and you can see that a little bit later in the video. And this does take a little bit of time too. I made my stitches really tight and really neat as I could make them. And so I did use quite a bit of embroidery floss, and this probably was the longest part of the whole process. So if you use like a wider stitch, I think you could get done a lot faster. And here you can see how it kind of misshapes the whole cone. I think if you had them overlapping, it would look a little bit better. And I actually worked on another hat later in the day in which I had them overlapping, and indeed it did hold the cone shape a little bit better. So at this point, I was undecided of how I wanted to do that last part, but I go ahead with the same stitch, only it's going to be extremely loose so that there's probably only going to be maybe 5 stitches through that last remaining part, where otherwise I probably would have done really tight stitches and maybe done 10 or 15. And this is just because I've got the wool bat that's going to be covered over that stitch anyway, so it's not going to show. And I think at this point I was just kind of getting tired of doing the stitches, so I decided to do something that was a little bit easier. I'm just going to tie it off here at the end, and that was something else. I didn't want to add more embroidery floss to my needle because that gets to be a hassle after a while. Okay, so let's trim that off and then get to the last part of this project, and that is to needle felt the rest of that beautiful wool top over the rest of the hat. And I did trim it down a little bit by pulling off some excess wool. And then at this point, I noticed that I probably need just a little bit at that top part there where I had started the hat with maybe not as wide of wool, and then I ended it with it being a little bit wider. And so I just wanted to adjust that. It only took a couple of minutes to do this little fix. And at this point, after all the time and effort, I did want it to look as beautiful as possible. Now, I was really impressed with the way that this hat turned out. It turned out better than I had thought. I love that wool detail at the bottom. I had debated on whether I wanted to do any embroidery on it, but I decided to wait till the end and see how it looked first. Actually, I didn't want to spend any more time doing any other detail because I liked it so much this way. All right, so there's my daughter modeling the hat along with a turquoise cape. She also has a purple cape that I sewed her a couple of years ago. I also have a tutorial on how to make that cape on my channel. I hope you check it out if you decide that you want to make the cape as well. If you want more information about the products that I used, you can find them on my website at pepperandpine.com, as well as down in the description box below. If you want to see some more of the activities that we are doing with our Middle Ages unit, you can tap on the screen right now. And if you want to see what we're up to on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.